Woo, swallowing this microphone like a giant cock. I gotta tell you. No, wait. Should I open it up with that? All right, yeah, no, I'm gonna run with it. I'm gonna go with that. The Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R Radio Star. You know, I've always said this, and if I didn't, I'm pretty sure I said it on air. But if I didn't, I think I would be the most epic gay man. I mean, I would be quite beloved, I'm sure. Anyway, got a big mouth, you know, and you hear it every. Well, you hear it every, I don't know, almost every day. I mean, shit, there's so much content coming out. But anyway, it is time for your Wednesday Zomia ONE Underground Q&A, and Dr. Brian Sovereign is here to deliver it all to you. And this week, unlike last week, following a, well, absolute tragedy, those that listen know the deal, we will have a traditional Q&A. We have great questions to get into. Got a couple things to open up with. First off, referencing last week's Q&A, which really was just an entire dedication episode, of course, to Sovereign Tech and Zomia One's absolute number one fan who passed away, that being Chris Pasquini at the age of 31. The amount of response that I got, and really, just hearing from everyone and saying that episode helped you deal with the loss of Chris and all this. I'll open it up here straight. Like, I'm so honored. And I am honored not for my work, but for the fact that other people got to experience Chris as I did and cared about him just as much. That's where the honor comes from. And so thank you to everyone that reached out to me. And I know that some of you, in fact, I'll put the link in the show notes here, the link to Chris's obituary, where you can leave comments and stories and memories there, and his entire family gets, would get to see that. And I think that's a very important thing to do for everyone to be able to know just how much Chris meant to, especially to the Sovereign Tech and Zomia One community as it relates to this audio. So, feel free to do that. Link is in the show notes. And again, certainly I expected as much, but I know the loss was far from something that just I felt. Many of you did as well, out in the Zomia One community, the Sovereign Tech community. So, but moving on from that, again, not really moving on from that, but you know what I mean. Again, please do check out that link, and please leave your stories, your experiences of Chris, no matter how small they are. I really implore you to do that. I also do want to take a quick second to thank my brother, Robin Freebeard, for sharing that episode on his YouTube channel, liberating it, and getting it out there for the entire world to hear about such a beautiful person, that being Chris Pasquini. So, okay, getting on from that. Now, just before I hit record, and folks, if you are hearing the fan in the background, it's hot as balls here on Ice Planet Zero. It is not Ice Planet at the moment. And so I got to have a fan going. This has been a thing in the past where I've had, air conditioning running while recording Sovereign Tech and all that. Look, you're not going to get great audio if the host isn't fucking comfortable. You understand? That's a reality of the situation. So anyway, if you hear a little fan in the back, that's what's going on. I've actually been using, and here's a tip for, and this one's for free. Here's a tip for you, folks. If you are a podcaster. Now if you've heard in a couple episodes recently, to kind of hide a little bit of that noise. Now there's a way where you can do noise removal in Audacity. That is a thing. But a fan is kind of inconsistent, so it's tough to do that. It can actually fuck with your audio a bit. But I've had also like an odd buzzing sound that I haven't exactly gotten to the heart of yet in some episodes as well. And where that's coming from, I'm not sure. But how I've been hiding it is actually using that background Starship hum that I usually use in the user podcast, or that I've used when I've done audio theater and all this. And it's amazing how much that little noise can hide. Haven't gotten any complaints from anybody about that noise, but if you're wondering why that's been in a couple episodes, that's actually why I've used it. I think I even used it in Gaming Grid the other day because, as I'm figuring out where that little buzz is coming from, that's the score. That's what I'm doing. So anyway, I don't know if I'm going to apply it to this episode, but if you're wondering about that, there's a little behind the curtain for you. And if you're a podcaster, I'm happy to send you the loop that I use. I made it myself. I didn't make the sound, but I made it where it's more loopable. let me know, and I'll gladly send you a WAV file for that. But it's a lot of fun. I actually love it. I love it when it's in the background. I always loved it when it was in the background on Star Trek: The Next Generation, or whatever Star Trek show that happened to use it, because Voyager would use it as well, and so on. But on Next Gen, I think it's a real part of the secret sauce, where you felt. I mean, it didn't hurt. To some people, it didn't help, but it didn't hurt, in my opinion, that the Enterprise D looked like the Radisson in space, right? I mean, it really looked like a luxury hotel. And so for it to have this like nice white noise in the background that kind of calmed and relaxed you, I think that was a secret sauce of why people enjoyed that show, and they didn't even realize it. And that sound is very powerful, especially if you listen to it on a really great sound system. I mean, understand, when I grew up, it's amazing how these stories happen. Anyway, when I grew up, I watched The Next Generation on, at that time, you understand, okay? And this would have been, let's see, I was watching it in syndication. This is before the show ended, so it's pre-94. So I would have been anywhere from like 10 to, I mean, I remember watching the first episode. I watched Encounter at Farpoint in 87. I was 6 years old. What was I watching? Man, well, anyway, I just, over that time frame, even at that point, pre-94, the TV I was watching everything on, at that time was already like 30, 40 years old. It was really, really insane. I mean, and it was a 24-inch TV, which boggles my mind. Right in front of me here in this, in my makeshift studio, I'm seeing, like, I have a 19-inch TV. Okay, and I actually, well, not just me, Ellen and I regularly watch Star Trek on this thing, but, a 24-inch television. I mean, the average person now, what do you have, like a 40-inch or something like that? A 24-inch TV was huge at that time, even in the 90s. I mean, that was a massive television. And it had that, it had basically, what did they call it? Binaural? It was mono. They were mono speakers, but there were two of them. But I mean, they're just these little, I doubt they were even like 2-inch speakers, 2-inch woofers that are just putting that out there. But that sound was fantastic. It was good enough, or it wasn't fantastic. It wasn't Dolby 7.1, obviously, right? Or it wasn't Dolby Atmos. But, the sound was enough, and you got that engine hum and everything. And I got so used to hearing that. In fact, when I was a kid, I used to leave a fan on just so that, ironically, what started this whole conversation was talking about fans. But I would leave a fan on in the bedroom just to like emulate that, or to simulate, I should say, that engine sound, the sound of a starship engine, because I just fell so in love with that sound. But you could even get that on a shitty, by today's standards, a shitty television. By that standards, it was, high end. Even though amazingly, it was like a 40-year-old Zenith before we finally saw it today. I mean, the only reason we ever got rid of that TV, it was this massive wooden Hulk thing, I'm just unbelievable. The only reason we ever got rid of it was because the color tube was going out and you couldn't buy a replacement color tube. So like it ended up going black and white. Not that I have a problem with black and white television at all, but anyway, amazing how we go down that road. But if you're wondering about that starship hum in the background, that's part of why it's there. With the user podcast, it's there on purpose to make it feel like you're on a starship. But when I've been using it in some recent episodes, it's actually to hide certain noise oddities that are electronic. I don't know what they are. It's not noise oddities that anyone else is engaging in. So anyway, now what I was really going to open up telling you about, because just before I started the show, I got this urgent email, and the email here, I'll just read it. You are invited. This is subject line. You are invited to test a new uTorrent product. And I do not trust uTorrent. Like, that used to be the best torrent client years ago. And I mean, we're talking over a decade ago. That was the big stuff. Because it was so fast. But then they started putting ads into it, and it just became really, it got really bogged down, a little too feature rich. And BitTorrent, was trying to do, as a company, was trying to do too much with it. Now, of course, BitTorrent is owned by the cryptocurrency organization, Tron. I mean, Tron is a crypto. Anyway, you all know that history. I'm not going to give you a history lesson here on all of that. But they have come up with, so this is what the email's about, because it has a picture at the top. It says BitTorrent Speed, the largest blockchain application powered by BitTorrent. And then it says BTT, which is the name for the digital token or cryptocurrency that BitTorrent Speed is involved with. Let me read it here. Congratulations, you are pre-selected to be part of the BitTorrent Speed Early Access Group. At BitTorrent, we are committed to creating products that our consumers love. We began ideating, I guess that's a word, and building BitTorrent Speed in Q4 of 2018. Since then, we have made major progress in the product, and we are inviting from our community to test our product before we launch. Stanley Breakin', and somehow I guess I was on their email list. I don't know how the fuck that happened, but I was. Anyway, it says, hurry, we have limited time that will close the early access group on Sunday, June 30th, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. BitTorrent Speed is a new product that rewards users with BitTorrent, BTT, in exchange for seeding and bandwidth, enabling faster downloads. The integration of BitTorrent Speed will not change any previous experiences using the uTorrent client. The product will always remain free to use. There are limited spots in the early access group, therefore participation is not guaranteed. Only Windows users are eligible to participate. Your opinion matters to us. Please join us in testing BitTorrent Speed. Then under that is just a click button in an email. It says, enter the early access group. Then it says, thank you for supporting us, BitTorrent team. Now, and you better believe I left them this feedback. This is kind of bad form. Okay, we're talking about cryptocurrencies. We're talking about BitTorrent. Okay. Two technologies that are a major part of, honestly, a lot of privacy-oriented individuals, shall we say, workflow, if we want to be kind about it. And for them to just like have this enter the early access group link and not have a link available for you to copy and paste, just as a security measure to make sure that you're going to the link that you want to go to, that way you're not part of a phishing attack, right? Where you click a link or you click a button like this in an email, but it actually takes you to, a malicious website or something. Because even when one of the ways to get around phishing attacks is you can just, hold your mouse, your cursor over the button and see, hey, where is this link sending me to? Now, even that sends to it doesn't send me right to BitTorrent.com. It sends me to, or at least not according to the link at the bottom. Obviously, it's a tracking link, but it's not, if I was a less knowledgeable person when it comes to the tech world, I don't know, I would see this and I'd be like, oh, I don't know about that link. I don't trust that link. And anybody that I've ever taught about avoiding phishing attacks, they would not click on this and they would lose out on what is actually, I'll tell you, it's a genuine opportunity, but it keeps getting worse, actually. So you click on the link and then it wants, and that tracking link, I get it. I understand why it's important, because when I clicked on it on my smartphone, okay, and again, I was doing this in secure fashion, because my red alert was going off, okay, when I got this email, because it has to do with, oh, you can make money. It's all these kinds of tricks and, early access group, you got to act now. It's a lot of these, honestly, social engineering tricks to get you to click a link and, who knows, do what else. So when I clicked on it on my smartphone, on my Android phone, it wouldn't the link wouldn't work because it knew that I was on Android. That was part of the point of this, tracking link and probably cookies and all that. But when I clicked on it on a Windows machine that I had, then it went through and it took me to the proper link and it says, okay, this is your Windows user, you can install this. And it asked me to install uTorrent. Now it's not telling me to install uTorrent, it's telling me to install BitTorrent Speed. When I click on that, it gives me it brings up the window in Windows to download uTorrent.exe. That's literally the name of it. There is no indication whatsoever that this is any kind of special. They're telling you it's a special installer, but by the name of the exe file, there's no indication that it's a special installer. It just says uTorrent.exe, which is a very commonly downloaded file name. And so, I could see that as a way of like getting past certain like malware detectors or whatever else. I know a proper malware detector is actually looking at the file size and the file itself, but also it's a very small file. Granted, uTorrent is still, by comparison to other software, a very lightweight client, so I'm not terribly surprised by that. Regardless, the point I'm telling you, and there's more, because it tells you to install it, or it tells you to download it, then it says, okay, now install it, and it's taking you through this entire survey. Okay, how was the install process? Was it easy enough? Blah, blah, blah. And that in itself is a social engineering trick to get you to not think about what you're doing and just have you keep going through as quickly as you can so you don't notice anything fishy. And I mean, again, I'm on high alert here going through this whole process, but I'm doing it partly because I know I get to tell all of you about it, especially if you got the offer as I did. And again, I just got this offer at like 5 p.m. Okay, on what's today, June 26th, 2019. So I'm going through it because I know that if there's a problem, I got shit sandboxed off and, I can deal with it. My listeners, not all of my listeners may be able to. So it's important that I go through this process. And so I'm doing it, going through it, and then it's asking you, click on this. Once you install it, it's like, okay, now click on where it says BitTorrent speed. Okay, did that come up okay? And it keeps telling you to do all these things. Now, I get what they're doing. They want to know, like, how easy is this process for the average person? And they even go through, like, as part of the survey, before you even install anything, before they take it to the installer, they're asking you, do you know about, like, they're looking to see how much you understand about cryptocurrency and torrenting itself. They ask you certain questions. What's an exchange? What's this? What is seeding? And anyway, so maybe if you got all those wrong, they wouldn't let you install the file. If that's the case, good on them, because if a person doesn't know what those terms are, you really shouldn't be sending them this email, and they don't need to be part of the early access group, in my opinion. This should be for knowledgeable people, But I guess that they sent this email out to people at random. Somehow I was on their email list. I mean, I can imagine how I was, but because, I've been following Tron for a while, but the technology, not the movie, even though I've been following the movie since I was a kid. But anyway, this is all looking, if I were any less, if my system was any less secure, I wouldn't have gone through this process. And what a shame, because I mean, if it's a genuine thing, I could have made some, genuine money, right? And, made some BTT, which, well, as I went through the process, it ends up all being legit. But I left them feedback and told them, if I were anyone else and they were working off the recommendations of like a cybersecurity advisor of any kind, or if they had a little bit of knowledge of how to secure their shit, they wouldn't have touched your email for a second. They wouldn't have touched it with a 10-foot pole. Because everything, the way you went through this whole process was incredibly fishy, was incredibly sketchy. But it is actually legit. And I don't know, I have such and so much BTT now, and we'll try it out. I mean, it looks interesting. I'm going to talk about it more on a Sovereign Tech episode, and we'll do it during blockchain, blockchain of the week, or whatever. This week in blockchain. Sorry, not blockchain of the week. It'll be the blockchain of the week. But anyway, we'll talk about it during this week in blockchain. We'll talk about BTT and all this and how it ends up working. I mean, basically, it's kind of similar to what Brave is doing, right, with their BAT token, or, with BAT, Basic Attention Token. It's similar to that, to where they're just trying to incentivize you to either look at an ad. In this case, it's for you to seed a torrent so that torrents are faster. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. I've already done my critiques of the Brave browser and BAT, but BTT, well, anyway, I'm checking it out, so it's there. So there's your story, and like they have you even, I mean, it's so crazy. They even have you like download a torrent to test it out, and it's like this 1 gig file of a test torrent, and I could see some bad actor using all of this to end up hijacking somebody's machine. I mean, a little fucking sketchy in my opinion. So, okay, anyway, I think I ended up talking about all this for like 20 minutes. Let's get into our questions for this week. Again, we have some good ones here. So, okay, this first one is actually from an email from a great patron. And he said here, "Hey, Brian, I was slumming it over at Gizmodo." Of course, we all know that's Gizmodo, but he spelled it he spelled it as Gizmodo because that's what we call it on Sovereign Tech. I love it. Anyway, I was slumming it over at Gizmodo and happened across this interesting quote. Myanmar, here's the quote, "Myanmar is also, in Facebook's own words, the only country in the world with a significant online presence that hasn't standardized on Unicode, meaning many of the artificial intelligence tools meant to weed out harmful content simply didn't work there. Since internalizing," and anyway, that's the end of the quote. By the way, the title of the email was Burma, the Unicode Monoculture, and AI. Great point. I mean, this could have been a whole segment on Sovereign Tech, and maybe at some point it still will be. Anyway, he goes on. The emailer says, the patron here says, since internalizing Bruce Schneier's admonitions in the 1990s to, quote, don't roll your own cryptography, end quote, I've completely discounted diversity of encoding systems as a potential surveillance workaround. But apparently it could make some sense, at least against some of the more commercial and blindly automated applications of artificial, quote-unquote, intelligence, I love that he put that in quotes, and fancy VC-funded statistics. Now, while I'm fantasizing, how great would it be if Watson failed to parse EBCDIC? So, all right, real quick. So, Unicode, for those, to explain what's being described here as briefly as I can. I'm not the best at being succinct with this sort of stuff, but I'm going to give it a shot here. So Unicode, for those that don't know, this includes all kinds of things, all kinds of standardized, basically languages within that make it easy for software to recognize what's being said. And it basically takes like any language that you happen to be typing in the world, and this also includes emoji, and it gives it a numerical value, right? So Unicode, that way software doesn't have to waste time actually reading like Japanese kanji. Instead, it just reads a numerical code and it knows that it's Japanese kanji. Okay, so that way it doesn't have to be, kind of that, it doesn't have to be that smart, and it doesn't really require AI. Now, the thing is that Unicode hasn't been exactly universally accepted. Now, in Myanmar, of course, where there's a Burmese population, where there's mass genocides going on there. In fact, that's kind of ironic, because actually my mother is a principal at a school. It's a Christian school, don't ask, that actually teaches Burmese refugee children. So that's kind of ironic. I'm very familiar with the situation, not just because I saw Rambo 4 either, but just... Anyway, very interesting, and very tragic. I mean, what's happening, over there is just, to the Burmese, is just fucking insane. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible tragedy. And the article from Gizmodo, by the way, is properly calling out the fact that Facebook is basically enabling a lot of the genocide over there by giving a platform for, the bad. I mean, calling them bad actors is. That's nowhere near strong enough language. I mean, the murderous people over there. I mean, it's really an ugly, ugly, ugly situation. Anyway, with Unicode, so there's some countries where there's a large online presence. Everybody's getting on with Facebook, and Facebook has certainly been doing what it can to give free internet around the world. Of course, it's not really free, right? You end up paying for it by being part of in Facebook's ecosystem. And honestly, now with the Burmese, so they're paying with their lives because of the spreading of false information and enabling, in a very real way, enabling genocide. Anyway, I'll put a link in the show notes in Gizmodo where you can read that whole story. But I want to get to the more abstract point. So some countries, some languages haven't been fully implemented into Unicode yet. Okay, so AI, can go through to AI, or algorithms get used to find things like quote unquote hate speech, quote unquote, fake news, whatever terms you want to come out there with. And the thing is that all those algorithms generally run off of Unicode. So if a language is not part of Unicode, the algorithms actually can't find it. Now, so that's kind of the issue here. The point that the emailer is making is that basically, as tragic as what's happening in Myanmar is, and it fucking is, it's the worst. No doubt. Okay? And I am genuinely glad that especially Burmese children have been able to escape into the United States. I mean, and I know that personally, and I can say from personal experience that they are getting those are kids. They are sweet children. They are learning. I mean, and they are ready to really take on the world with the opportunity that they've been given. By escaping the horrific conditions that they were in. So anyway. That said, okay, the idea of using basically a language that's not part of Unicode and using that to thwart these algorithms and AI, using it as an encryption scheme, more or less. Kind of like how in MeetSpace, you have the ZXX font, right? Which is designed to thwart facial recognition software, where it's a font where it says things and it's supposed to, the way that it has funny dots around each letter, and I think that's called ZXX. We talked about it years ago. on Sovereign Tech. And I'm not saying that that's foolproof either, but the basic gist is that you use that font type for signs in the real world, and then various surveillance cameras and or other algorithmic cameras, facial recognition software, or should I say software? The software can't recognize what it is. The cameras obviously just show the video what it literally is. But software that's watching the video instead of a person watching the video is confused. It doesn't know what's written on the sign if you're using the ZXX font, or if you used that to make it. So this is taking that to the digital realm, where instead you have, this is a way of getting around surveillance, of where you can type stuff with a little more impunity. And you're not going to worry about the algorithms seeing what you're saying. Because, let's be clear here, okay? Now, the real, I don't know if I want to get into a big conversation about what Facebook should be doing about the fact that its platform is being used to enable genocide. I think the answer is shut fucking Facebook down. Is that going to happen? Not by Facebook themselves. I wouldn't begin to expect any kind of ethics from that organization, or from that company, or that government arm, whatever you want to call it. But understand that these algorithms designed to find hate speech and a lot of these other things, that is a double-edged sword that can end up being, you could say it's designed to get rid of fake news. It could also be designed to get rid of real news, when real news is a threat to the status quo or to whatever form of authoritarianism is out there. And I've warned about that for quite some time. So the idea of having, typesets, or, having a language that's not part of Unicode, yeah, that gets interesting. That is something that I'm sure I'm not sure. I imagine somebody might be rocking that kind of thing already, but if not, it needs to become somewhat more popular. Okay, and it's not impossible to do. Now, he says, now while I'm fantasizing, how great would it be if Watson failed to parse EBCDIC? So, yeah. So Watson, of course, IBM's AI. Now, EBCDIC is actually, that's IBM's, that was one of their standardized languages, software languages, that didn't play so well with ANSI. And so, there's issues with Unicode, and Unicode and ANSI, there's all these kind of, confusions that come around with it. But the basic gist of creating languages, again, that these algorithms actually can't detect because they haven't been fed what this means yet. It's not going to stop every algorithm, but it could stop a few. I think that gets pretty interesting. Just like the MeatSpace version of using like ZXX as a font on your sign, which again, you just have to train train the algorithm a little better in the software to be able to read the sign. And then you'd have to come up with another, like you'd have to come up with ZXX2 or ZXX3, whatever. Okay. It's an arms race, but I think that's a very, very intriguing concept that could be really, that could be very helpful. And frankly, you have refugees in this country who could, teach you, quite a bit about Burmese and their language and so on, and where maybe you could take advantage of it right now. But anyway, you'd have to set it up more in other ways. And I really don't want to, laugh about, again, the absolute tragedy going on over there. And fuck Facebook for, doing anything really, really to help it. So, but just putting that out there, I thought that was a very interesting idea. I think that that's definitely a possibility. It's something that it is part of the crypto toolkit that should exist for activists and for people that honestly just give a shit about their privacy, and really for truth tellers and truth seekers. I think it should be part of that crypto toolkit out there. So very, very interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, and so I'm glad you shared that story with me. And I, again, link for the actual story where this kind of outcrop from is in the show notes. So, all right, let's move on to another question. And boy, do we have one of the most, when we get to our album of the week this week, we have one of the most expensive albums of all time to talk about. This is, and I'm not kidding, this is going to be something. So I got this from another email from, this might be the most special person on the planet. Let's see here. Dr. Sovereign. Oh, I like that. Dr. Sovereign. Well, wait, I opened up the show with that, but I like this. Dr. Sovereign. People have always wondered and tried to theorize about the ways that the Egyptian pyramids were built. Boy, Stallion breaking in. No fucking kidding, right? There's about as many theories around that as there are theories of, anything. Let's move on. What do you think? Did the Egyptians merely have Stone Age tools, or are modern archaeologists avoiding a few necessary truths about their technological achievements? Thanks. And this is in asterisks here, an anonymous supporter. P.S. You are most definitely the sexiest man alive. Wow, who the hell sent this? This anonymous supporter and calling me the sexiest man alive. I'm shocked here. Anyway, let's get to the email. Let's get to the question. Actually, it looks like at the bottom of this email looks like some hieroglyphs here. Looks like the letter ELLEN. Can't imagine who that is. Again, looks like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. I don't know. That's so strange. So, but yeah, it's sexiest man alive. How about that? All right, reading on with the question. So, did the Egyptians merely have Stone Age tools, or are modern archaeologists avoiding a few necessary truths about their technological achievements? Yeah, so great question. Yeah, I think that they're missing. All right, so I've brought this up many times, but this is important to repeat because this needs to get hammered in people's heads, because I don't think they either A, realize this, or they just don't want to accept it. In the modern world, the idea that everybody, okay, or that most people have a smartphone, right? Or that most people, like we were just talking about, have access to Facebook. That is an outcropping of one thing, the industrial age. That is totally about the industrial age. That is about the assembly line process, all these things that came together to allow for the democratization of technology. Okay, that makes us, the thing is that creates a false sense of advancement in today's world. Okay, this is, I want to drive this point home, but then I'll get specific. Okay, so the false sense of advancement that the industrial age created, that the democratization of technology created, is that somehow we in the 20th, if you want to go 19th to 21st century, if you want to go that far, that we are like the first advanced, or we are the first people with any kind of real advanced technology. Now, advanced technology can be a very broad term. Okay, but that we're the only ones maybe that have had access to electricity. We're the only ones that have had all the things that you think of today, whatever technological achievement you want to imagine. But that's not necessarily true. You think that because you don't see signs of it in the past. But what you take as your basis for signs of that being the truth in the past is that, well, we should find, there should be smartphones everywhere, or there should be cars everywhere. There should be engines everywhere. There should be airplanes everywhere. There should be all these things, because you think that technology inherently to be developed has to be democratized. Democratized meaning everybody has access to it. That is not a given. That is not true at all. Okay? So the point I'm making is that there could have been advanced technology in the past. It could have been developed. And to some degree, we have some proof of this, right? Where you have the potential for where an ancient Roman made a steam engine. Okay? I mean, now that's not the most advanced thing, but that's pretty damn good. And I think when the steam engine was first getting developed, probably not a lot of people thought that the ancient Romans had what they considered to be the most advanced, almost to the point of a state secret at the time. So, ancient humans, our ancestors, could have had wildly advanced technology. Now, maybe it wasn't wildly advanced, that's a guess, but could have had let's just say they could have had advanced technology, and we wouldn't know it because there'd only be maybe one or two of them, like maybe that steam engine, ever made. And so we'd have to find those like a needle in a haystack. Okay, and so, but that's the problem is that most people think it's like, oh, well, if they had it, we'd see signs of it. Not necessarily. Maybe it was a technology only royalty had access to. And you say, well, how could they build it if they didn't have like the Industrial Revolution, if they didn't have the assembly line process and all these other things? That's because, look, I mean, royalty had the power, perceived power of God on earth, right? Meaning that they could, tax you for everything. They could, have entire slave not slave gangs, but they slave workforces, which they did. You could have entire slave workforces, all of these things that would allow them to really achieve incredible things, like perhaps the Great Pyramids, without needing to have the assembly line, without needing necessarily, to have like everybody on planet Earth or everybody within their empire or civilization, whatever, having access to it. Okay, it really could be just something fucking incredible built for one person in the entire empire, perhaps the pharaoh or the emperor or whatever. So you got to get that out of your head, that the evidence that our ancestors weren't advanced is because you don't find technology all over the place. It's not a given that technology not being all over the place is somehow proof that it wasn't developed in the past. Okay? So we got that part. That has to be driven home. It is entirely possible that advanced technology existed in the past. It just wasn't democratized, so you don't see the evidence for it. Okay? And because it's not democratized, you don't even get to see it. Because, technology, for example, the car, okay, the automobile. The automobile brings on, the bane in the libertarian side, that being the roads. I'm kidding about that. It's not the bane. Libertarians have answers for the roads. It's just, people know that trope. Anyway, or that really it's a joke now. But, the automobile is what brings on the, paved roads, right? So, but because, the only reason paved roads necessarily became a thing was really because the automobile was a democratized technology. And so everybody needed roads. And so cities and how humans lived and civilizations started to build up around these paved roads. Or the roads that were there before changed and expanded. I mean, this still happens to this day where, a 2-lane highway turns into a 5-lane highway and so on. Okay, based upon how many people there are and the technology available, etc. Okay, so... But that's the thing, is that if the technology, say in ancient times, wasn't democratized, you would not see signs of it in their cities, in their civilization. Not really, maybe a little bit if you've actually found it. But that point has to, we gotta put that one, you gotta have that at your centrality of whenever we're talking about anything, especially like the Great Pyramids, where you look at it and you go, how the fuck did they do that? Because, yeah, your instant, like the question asker, like they brought up, was it just stone tools? There's no reason that it had to be. There could have been some kind of technology at the time that only the pharaoh or the priesthood, whoever, had access to, and they could only and they used it only for their buildings. And in fact, if it was a unique technology, that might explain. In fact, it's that effect of democratized technology in reverse. Okay, one of the weirdest things about the pyramids, okay, is that compared to almost all other Egyptian architecture, is that you go into temples, you go into any of these buildings, that the Egyptians built, ones that don't impress as much, say, as like Khufu's pyramid, which there's a problem with that. I don't believe that graffiti was real. I think that was a fraud to claim that the Great Pyramid was built by Khufu. But anyway, we just make that point. We're going to move on. That's something. If you want to ask about that, we can go into the evidence around that. But in almost any other ancient Egyptian building, from Old Kingdom, Middle to New, you see within it, there's tons of hieroglyphs, right? There's tons of writing. In fact, exactly how they built a lot of these other buildings. Almost uniquely. The Sphinx is another one, but in a rare case, the pyramids have no writing about how they were built. All you had was the graffiti found that said Khufu's name. That's about it. There is no other writing, and it is a stark contrast. And if you ever actually go to Egypt and look around, you're going to notice it. You might not consciously notice it, but unconsciously, it's part of what makes the pyramids feel special, is that they are different from every other Egyptian building around. Now, I would argue, and I have said this in the past, I would argue actually it's because the pyramids are not Egyptian at all. The Egyptians were effectively squatters. Okay, they found the pyramids and they decided to build their civilization around them because they looked at them and they go, holy fuck, what are those? Must be something around here. And of course, eventually they do find other things, and that we could get into a big story around that. In fact, I did my Audio of the Ancients, which you can find at audiooftheancients.xyz. The first one I ever did was the Dream Stela of Tutmos IV. Tutmos IV was a pharaoh who he had a dream, and that's why they call it the Dream Stela, which is basically a story of, well, the story is how he found the Sphinx, not how he built it, how he found the Sphinx, okay? So in this, he has this dream where the Sphinx is talking to him. And there's no reference really to the Sphinx before this. So it would appear that Tutmos IV was the first one to find it. Now, it gets claimed generally that someone else built it, but it's an Egyptian. But according to the Dream Stela itself, the first-hand, quote-unquote, the first-hand account, the Sphinx is talking to Tutmos in his dream and says, basically says, unbury me. Get me out of here. And that's apparently exactly what happens. Is Tutmos IV sends out his guys and slaves, and they unbury. They find under the sands exactly where the Sphinx told him in his dream. They find the Sphinx. They didn't build it. They found it. Now the Egyptians might have altered the face of it to where they put a face on it, because originally it was probably a lion. There's a pretty good bet that it was actually a lion, because like putting the headdress on it was probably originally a mane. It was a lion's mane. Okay, or some people have some other ideas that maybe it was Horus. I'm not opposed to that, but the idea of it being a lion, I think that fits in with the facts a little bit better. So, now, again, folks, if you think I'm going to talk aliens, no. Like, it's not aliens, and I'll get into that in a second, too, but I'm not going to say it's aliens. This is not some ancient aliens business. So, anyway, with the pyramids, the point I was making was that because it is so different from every other building around, that actually is highly suggestive that some other technology besides what everything else in Egypt was built with was used to build the pyramids, because they are so starkly different. Now, there's a lot of pyramids. There's more than just the three, like the pyramids of Giza. There are other pyramids. Okay, and some of those don't follow the same rules, where actually they do have writing in them, and it's very easy to see the way that they're built, because they're kind of similar to maybe some in South America and wherever else, which there's certainly a story to get into around that. But it's very easy to see how they were built, because like they're more of like a stepladder style as compared to like the straight flat, and they don't have like the Queen's chamber. They don't have like the crazy chambers and other things that make particularly the Great Pyramid of Giza so unique. So now, how exactly were they built? Do I have a theory? No, I don't have a theory. But here's the rub with me, is that the theory I do have, and it's not just my theory. Understand that you have the Turin's Kings list, which goes back some odd 80,000 years from today. Okay, so from the time of ancient Egypt, you're still going back, some odd 75, 78,000 years, or no, not 78, but yeah, I guess like about 76, 75,000 years, you're going to be going back in time that they have recorded history for. Okay? Now, I mean, you could say that list is made up or something. It has gods and demigods on it, but that's not all it has. So they were, either they were mixing in some fiction with their nonfiction, or that list to some degree is nonfiction and the gods maybe are just misunderstood. Anyway, point being, regardless of what these, who these people are that are on the Turin's Kings list, regardless of who they are, who they really are, Egyptians accepted and wrote down a human history that goes back 60 to 70,000 years further back than anything else we've got. Okay? Where did they get all of this information? Especially since it's kind of rare. Is it information they found out about when they got to whatever this roving population was, when they ended up getting to Egypt? Is that how they found it? I mean, it's a great question to ask. But I think the fact that they have history that goes that far back means that they knew something of it. And I think that the pyramids themselves are part of that ancient history for the ancient Egyptians themselves. I really do think that they just kind of, in fact, there's the Sumerians, who are an older civilization than the Egyptians, even though to some degree they could be contemporary later on. But regardless of that, the Sumerians, they even have merchant records where they are talking about effectively ziggurats that are, which is their version, and they're not like pyramids, but kind of. But basically, they find these ziggurats in the area where the pyramids were. Now, how exactly are the Sumerians, who were around a good few hundred to, 1,000, or however long before the Egyptians were a thing, how are they talking about these gigantic structures in the area of what would become Egypt before the Egyptians even built them? You've got a problem there. So, and some people want to say, well, we're mistranslating, these merchant records from the Sumerians and blah, blah, blah. I mean, and hey, you know what? Maybe there are mistranslations are a very real and legitimate thing. Okay, but then also, so are, forgeries are a real thing, and most people don't want to call that out as long as it fits in with their archaeological narrative. Another important thing to bring up is that archaeologists will absolutely lie and fudge evidence if it fits their overall narrative and their sensibilities. That's the most important part, their sensibilities. We have countless cases where archaeologists would hide their findings in secret rooms in museums. This is not bullshit. Okay, I mean, like there's a statue in that Italian museum, very famous, where a Roman guy is like sucking a goat's cock. I'm not kidding. You have where, at certain sites where there'd be frescoes with these, like lewd sexual acts. I wouldn't call them lewd, or if they are, then they're probably fun. But these lewd sexual acts on the wall in some temple or something like that, or some, well, frankly, a brothel. And they would cover them up with plaster of Paris just to keep their narrative that, no, the people we are exploring, the city we are exploring right now, they were a holy people. Just so that they could keep that narrative, regardless of the evidence that suggested clearly fucking otherwise. Or maybe they considered sex a sacred thing, which, hey, right on. So these are all the things you kind of have to put together to say, like, are we missing parts of the picture of what happens with how did the pyramids get built? Yeah, I think so. And I think the most important part of the picture, or the two most important parts, are that we're only trying to come up with solutions based upon Stone Age tools, which that should not be accepted as a given. Now, you don't want to run to aliens. I don't think aliens have ever been to Earth. I mean, folks, we have things called the laws of physics, and I don't even think they're breaking them. But I don't think aliens have ever been to Earth. That's a conversation. I've had it many times on Sovereign Tech. Fermi paradox, there's your answer. They're not out there. I mean, there's some out there. I do believe that aliens, and I mean sapient aliens, intelligent aliens, do exist in the universe, but I just think they're very few and far between. But the first thing to accept is that, we're not thinking outside, I hate this phrase, but we're not thinking outside of the box to where maybe they had some kind of advanced technology. We're not willing to accept that because we don't see it, and the average archaeologist and average person just wants, is stuck in this mode that if they had this technology, we would see it everywhere. When again, that is not a given in the historical record. It's not a given part of that. Okay? So we've got that. And then we have the entire fucking issue of whether or not the Egyptians built them in the first place. And I think the evidence that they did build them when supposedly Khufu ordered it and so on is specious at best. And I think there's just as much evidence, which you could call specious, but then I'd say it's just as specious as your fucking graffiti, that suggests otherwise. That suggests the pyramids had been there long before there was an old, middle, or new kingdom in the Egyptian Empire. So, yeah, I mean, those are, if there were necessary, I like the way that I mean, obviously this emailer is just one of the most brilliant people on the planet. I love the way that this was asked. Are they avoiding a few necessary truths about their technological achievements? Yes, there are necessary truths, and I laid out two big ones that they are completely avoiding as far as that goes. So I mean, do you want to ask me, like, do I have a theory? I don't have a theory on how they were built. I would be very open to that in some kind of advanced technology, maybe even one that we don't have today, was used to build the pyramids. I'm totally open to that. What that would look like, I don't know. And, I mean, we do know that the Egyptians had access to electricity, right? I mean, there's the Baghdad battery. That's something I think everybody should know about, because that will change your fucking tune as far as the idea that we're the first people to understand electricity. Okay, only in the past, so many hundreds of years. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like it could be a technology that's not like not silicon based or whatever. I don't know. I mean, like there's a lot of questions to have there. So I don't know where to speculate with that. Where I am comfortable speculating is that absolutely I think that our ancestors, and maybe ancestors that we don't have a record for, as in they come from from either Göbekli Tepe or even beyond that, which Göbekli Tepe is at least 14,000 years old. Maybe it goes even further, or at least 12,000 years old anyway. That there were perhaps human civilizations, very human, that were wildly advanced and that we don't have the evidence for. Or we don't see the signs of them. But maybe it's because it was so long ago. There was in fact, we talked about it on Sovereign Tech when this talk was given. There was a talk given at Harvard by a very respected researcher, not some ancient alien guy, okay, like the real deal. And he basically came out and said, however, on a long enough timeline, he went from millions of years to even a few 100,000. If there was an advanced civilization then, we would have no proof that they even existed today. We really wouldn't. Now, and he's meaning you wouldn't have proof of their advancements. I think you do have proof that there were advanced human, not alien, human civilizations. And that evidence is the things that stood the test of time, and those things were made out of stone, like the Great Pyramids and perhaps other these amazing stoneworks that you see, like megalithic sites that you see around the world. I think a lot of them are evidence of these far more ancient civilizations, human civilizations, than archaeologists and anthropologists are willing to admit existed. So there you go. There's my answer on that. I think that there was an advanced civilization that made the pyramids. Who were they? Well, then that turns into a whole other fucking conversation. But I think they were there, and I think our ancestors knew about them, had some kind of idea about them. Is it Plato with Atlantis? Is it the Turin Kings List? Is it the Minoans? That's an interesting place to look. Conversation for another time. So, all right. I don't know. I was going to make some kind of pun there, but let's just get into it. We're going to talk about the album of the week for this week, and I have a fucking doozy for you. And I mean, I have a real doozy. This is something that, okay, longtime Sovereign Tech listeners, Zomia ONE listeners, you know the deal. You know I am a huge fan. It's my top band. It will always be my top band. I can't picture anyone knocking them out of the seat, though Dream Theater, but Kiss. I fucking love Kiss. Huge fan. And my favorite member of Kiss, I mean, it's always a toss-up between Gene and Paul, but Gene Simmons, I'm not going to say he's the best human on planet Earth. There's plenty of things I disagree with him, especially when it comes to his politics and some other things. But Gene Simmons, I mean, real straight to head, I absolutely respect his talent, and I think he is very talented. Okay, I mean, is he Billy Sheehan? Okay, maybe not, but he's Gene fucking Simmons. He's the demon. Now, I've been a fan of Gene Simmons' solo work. I loved his album. What that came out in 2004 was that Asshole. Great album. I liked his his solo album when they did the Kiss solo albums when Peter, Paul, Ace, and Gene all did their own solo albums. I dig that. Like, I thought Radioactive was a great song. He came out with last year in 2018. He came out with something called The Vault. Okay, it's called Gene Simmons Vault. There's a link in the show notes if you want to check this out, because if you don't believe me, no, this is a very, very real thing. And I'm not saying necessarily that it should be. But basically, this vault, okay, it is 11 discs. Not kidding. It is 11 discs. And there's a good 15, 16 tracks on each of these 11 discs. You're getting a lot of music here. And what it is, it's all of Gene Simmons, there's a lot of demos, a lot of this other stuff. And he puts it in this vault case, and there's like a collectible coin in it. There's all this other crap that comes, a big book that comes in and everything with all these rare photos and lyrics and all this other stuff. Okay, you are getting a lot of music for this. There's no doubt about that. But do you want to know how much it costs to buy this box set of box sets? And I mean, again, it comes in a literal gigantic vault. You are going to hash out $1,500 for 11 CDs. Yeah, maybe it's around, I don't know, 5 hours. Well, no, maybe it's me more. I don't know. It's a lot of music. I'm going to give it that. There's a lot of listening, and I've been listening to it. But you're going to pay $1,500. If you want to have Gene deliver it to you, he will do that, and you will pay $2,000 though, which the extra $500 is paying for his plane ticket. Literally, I'm not kidding. Only Gene Simmons would do this, and it's totally believable that he would. But that's the extra $500 is. Now, Gene Simmons, I know as a fan, you're saying, wow, $500, he'd be able to do that. Gene Simmons flies coach, and he said as much. He says, rock stars fly coach. He says, you wouldn't believe it, he says, but we do. And I think he actually does that. So yeah, $500. Yep, I bet that works. So if you want Gene to bring you this experience, to the Vault experience, as it's called, you want to get this 11 discs. All right, now I'm going to tell you, breaking down the music itself, there's genuinely some great music here. I'm not kidding. I think some of this is brilliant shit. In fact, he talked about doing this over a decade ago when he came out with his book Sex, Money, Kiss. He advertised in Sex, Money, Kiss, which is a great book. He advertised in that he was going to release some 6 CD set that would have rare music on it. Now, what he did end up doing is you could buy this lunchbox version of the audiobook of Sex, Money, Kiss, which came with the audiobook on CDs of Sex, Money, Kiss, and it came with a couple of bonus tracks on it that you could only get on that set. I'm pretty sure those 2 tracks are on here, because I did buy that back in the day, because that wasn't $2,000 fucking dollars. But but anyway, the music on this, and some of it's very new. The first track on the first album, or on the first disc, I should say, not the first album. The first disc is called Are You Ready? And it's from 2011. And it's a good song. I like it. I like it a lot. There's a lot, especially on that first disc. I mean, that opens up really, really strong. And there's some demos here. There's a demo for Carnival of Souls, right, from from that album, which the song Carnival of Souls did eventually get released officially on Gene Simmons' 2004 album, Asshole. But there's a demo version on here. I mean, but there's some really great songs on this. I'm not going to deny that. Good luck finding MP3s of this. I did find it, and apparently Gene Simmons did some kind of encoding to where you really can't get your hands on it. There's a couple songs where they sound a little staticky, and maybe that's kind of some kind of DRM that he put on it, on the CDs. Frankly, I don't care, because none of the music is at the level where, wow, I want to listen to this over and over and over again, and so I want the highest fidelity possible. I just want to know what's here. There's some songs where I want to do that, but anyway, it's out there. Let's just put it that way. The MP3s are out there for you to get your hands on. And I think if you're a Kiss fan, it's worthwhile. If you're not a Kiss fan, it's not worthwhile. If you're not a hardcore Kiss fan, where you buy Paul Stanley's solo album, which Live to Win is a fucking awesome album, or you buy Gene Simmons' Asshole, you buy this, and you could probably buy Gene Simmons' Asshole. I'm sure his actual asshole. I'm sure he put that up for auction somewhere. Okay, because this guy will do anything for money. I don't necessarily say that with disrespect, but anyway, you can find this, but only if you're that kind of fan, kind of like me. Is it really worthwhile, in my opinion? And I'm sure at some point he's going to come out with some kind of other album, or he's going to make some kind of less limited edition version of this, and he'll put it out there. I really do think he'll do that at some point, and then you can get your hands on it. But I really wanted to know. I'm like, okay, what the fuck is on these discs? I got to hear what a $2,000 disc collection sounds like. And again, there's some parts of it that I think are really, really good, and I'm glad that I have these songs in my, in Plex, in my library. But at the same time, it's only if you're that big of a fucking fan, So, because I'm keeping it within context that, okay, it's Gene Simmons. It's great for Gene Simmons. Is it Whitesnake? Is it this or that? Well, maybe not that. So anyway, there's your album of the week, Gene Simmons, The Vault, that 11 disc set. I mean, it's a lot of music there. And if you take the time to find it, again, I do think it's worthwhile, but just keep it in perspective. So that's going to wrap it up for your Wednesday Q&A. We'll get this out there. It's nice to have the stuff coming out a little more on time as late. Things got a little more steady here. So anyway, I'll wrap this up. I will see all of you on the other side.